I found out they changed the Netflix password on a Tuesday morning. It wasn't a big deal at first glance. Just a small pop-up on my television screen. Incorrect password. Please try again. I typed in the old one, the one I'd used for years, the one I'd set up myself when I bought this house. It didn't work. I tried it again. Same message. Then I went to the account recovery page, put in my email address, the one I've always used for Netflix, the one that links to my bank account, where the monthly payment comes out, the one that links to my name, the name on the deed to this house. And that's when the real shock hit. Because the email address listed for the account recovery was not mine. It was my brother Mark's. My brother Mark and his wife Lisa and their 2 teenage kids, Jamie and Chloe, who are currently living in my house, the house I own, the house I worked my entire life to buy and maintain, the house I invited them into when they had nowhere else to go. The Netflix password. It was such a small thing, but it felt like a punch to the gut. It wasn't about the shows. It was about ownership, about respect, about gratitude, or rather the complete lack of it. They changed the password. In my house, on my account. Without a word, it was such a bold, dismissive act. It wasn't just Netflix, it was everything. It was the culmination of years of small indignities, of my generosity being taken for granted, of my home slowly becoming theirs while I became a guest in my own life. I sat there on my worn sofa, the one I bought after saving for months, the one that's now covered in their kids' snack crumbs, and just stared at the blank screen. My hand was shaking. It felt like a small crack had appeared in a dam, and behind it, a tidal wave of anger and sorrow was building. I had let them in. I had offered them sanctuary, and this was their thanks. Changing the password on an account I pay for in a house I own. It was a declaration, a silent, insolent claim of territory. They weren't just living here anymore, they were taking over. My mind raced back to how this all started. It wasn't a sudden thing. It was a slow creep, an insidious takeover, a gradual erosion of my boundaries and my peace. It began with kindness, with family obligation. Mark had lost his job again. Lisa's part-time work barely covered groceries. Their apartment lease was up, and their landlord wasn't renewing it, due to too many complaints about noise and unpaid rent. They were desperate. Mark called me, his voice choked with feigned humility, painting a picture of destitution, of his poor kids having nowhere to sleep. He knew how to play me. He knew my soft spots, my deep-seated desire to help family, to be the strong one, the responsible one. Just for a few months, Sarah, he pleaded over the phone, his voice a low rumble. Just until I get back on my feet. We'll be quiet. We'll help with bills. It's just a temporary thing. Temporary. That word echoed in my empty living room, mocking me. That was 2 years ago. 2 long years. The house, my sanctuary, my quiet haven, had slowly transformed into a chaotic boarding house. My meticulously organized kitchen was now a disaster zone of sticky countertops and unwashed dishes. My quiet evenings were filled with the blare of their television, their arguments, the kids' loud video games. My privacy was a forgotten concept. My spare bedroom, which I had planned to turn into a small home office, became Mark and Lisa's bedroom. The living room sofa was where Jamie slept most nights, claiming he preferred it to the air mattress in the guest room. Chloe took the guest room, filling it with her clothes and makeup, leaving no space for anything else. I had tried to set ground rules, I really had. When they first moved in, I sat them down at the dining table, the one my grandmother gave me, and explained. "This is my home," I'd said, trying to be firm but kind. "I love you all, and I am happy to help. But we need to keep things tidy. We need to respect each other's space, and we need to talk about bills." Mark had nodded earnestly. Lisa had smiled sweetly. promising to be the best house guests ever. The promises had evaporated faster than water on a hot pavement. Bills, that was another sore point. They promised to contribute. At first, it was a token amount, then nothing at all. I was too embarrassed to chase them for it. My brother, my family. How could I demand money from them when they were struggling? But their struggling seemed to involve new phones, expensive takeout meals, and endless online shopping. My bank account, meanwhile, was bleeding. The electricity bill, the water bill, the internet bill, all surged. And, of course, Netflix. The Netflix I paid for, that they now controlled. The small indignities piled up. My groceries disappearing from the fridge. My favorite coffee mug, chipped and left unwashed. My mail opened without permission. My car borrowed without asking and returned with an empty tank. My quiet mornings shattered by their alarm clocks and loud conversations. My evenings no longer peaceful, but a constant negotiation of television channels and noise levels. And I, the homeowner, found myself retreating more and more into my bedroom, the one place that still felt somewhat like my own. I ate my meals alone in there sometimes, just to escape the chaos. I felt like a stranger in my own home, tiptoeing around, trying not to disturb them, trying not to ask for too much. Because every request, every gentle reminder was met with a sigh, a roll of the eyes, or an accusation of being ungrateful for their presence. "You are lucky to have us, Sarah," Lisa had once sneered, after I'd politely asked them to clean up the kitchen after a late-night snack session. Most people would be lonely living in such a big house by themselves. That stung. Lonely. Yes, sometimes I was lonely. But I preferred my loneliness to this constant, draining presence. This parasite on my life, slowly sucking the joy out of everything I owned, everything I had worked for. Now the Netflix password. It was a line crossed. It was a tangible act of blatant disrespect. It was them saying, "This is ours now, including your entertainment, including your money, including your privacy." It was a bold move, almost mock. Changes the password on an account they don't even pay for, in a house they don't own. Someone who feels utterly entitled. Someone who has forgotten, or perhaps never even knew, the meaning of gratitude. My heart pounded with a mix of fury and despair. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw them out. But the thought of the confrontation, the inevitable drama, the accusations, the tears, the manipulations stopped me cold. Muck would play the victim, Lisa would play the martyr, the kids would pout. It would be a messy, ugly scene. And I hated conflict. I always had. That was my weakness, the very thing they exploited. My desire for peace, my aversion to confrontation, my deep-seated hope that somehow they would realize, they would appreciate, they would change. But they hadn't. They had only escalated. From taking over my space, to taking over my resources, to now symbolically taking over my digital life. What was next? My bank account? My identity? I stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at my well-kept garden. The one I had spent years tending, the one that now had a broken sprinkler head, thanks to Jamie's soccer ball, and a patch of dead grass where Lisa had left a grill out in the rain for weeks. This wasn't just about Netflix. This was about my life, my home, my boundaries, all being systematically dismantled by the very people I had tried to help. And for the first time, a cold, hard resolve began to settle in my chest, pushing past the pain and the fear. This had to stop. The house felt like a cage. Their presence was stifling. I had to get them out. The Netflix password was just the catalyst, the spark that ignited the bonfire of my long-suppressed rage. They had underestimated me. They had mistaken my kindness for weakness. They had taken too much. And now, I was going to take my life back. I walked to the kitchen, passing the breakfast dishes piled high in the sink, ignoring the crumbs on the counter. I opened the fridge, my favorite yogurt gone, my expensive organic milk nearly empty. My mind was made up. This was it. The very next morning, I woke up with a knot of dread in my stomach, but also a strange sense of purpose. The previous day's discovery of the Netflix password change had been a jolt, a cold splash of reality. It forced me to look back, to really see how I'd ended up in this situation. It wasn't just them, it was me too. My endless capacity for giving, my reluctance to say no, my deep-seated hope that my family would eventually appreciate my help and reciprocate. It all started 7 years ago, when our parents died within months of each other. Our mother first, after a long illness, then our father, seemingly from a broken heart. Mark and I were left with an inheritance that wasn't huge, but it was enough for me to put a significant down payment on this house, a place I'd always dreamed of owning. Mark, meanwhile, blew his share on a series of bad investments, a new car he couldn't afford, and general irresponsible spending. He was always like that. Charming, irresponsible brother, and I was the quiet, reliable sister. The one who always cleaned up his messes, or at least tried. When Mark and Lisa first got together, I hoped things would change. Lisa seemed sensible, grounded, but she quickly adapted to Mark's way of life, or perhaps she encouraged it. They were a pair, living beyond their means, always borrowing, always struggling, always blaming someone else for their misfortunes. My house was a haven for me. After years of hard work, saving every penny, I finally had a place that was truly mine. I poured my heart into it, renovating, decorating, creating a space of peace and quiet. For 5 blissful years, it was exactly that, my sanctuary. Then came the call 2 years ago. Mark's voice was hoarse, desperate. "Sarah, we're being evicted. We have nowhere to go. The kids are terrified." He painted a picture of absolute destitution. I remembered my parents always saying family sticks together. I remembered promises I'd made to them to always look out for Mark, even though he was older. He knew how to pull at those heartstrings. He reminded me of that promise. I hesitated. I really did. I knew Mark. I knew Lisa. I knew their track record. But the thought of my niece and nephew Jamie and Chloe, suddenly homeless, living in a car, was too much. They were just teenagers. They hadn't chosen their parents' recklessness. So, I opened my doors. Just for a few months, I told myself. Just until Mark got a stable job, until they saved some money. The initial days were tolerable. They were on their best behavior. Lisa cooked a few meals. Mark offered to help with yard work, though he never actually did much beyond raking leaves once. The kids were polite, if a little withdrawn. I felt a sense of pride, of doing the right thing, of upholding my family values. But it didn't last. Mike's job hunt mostly involved playing video games and complaining about the economy. Lisa's part-time work consisted of a few hours a week, with most of her time spent online shopping or watching television. The few months turned into 6 months, then a year. Each time I gently broached the subject of them finding their own place, Mark would become defensive. Lisa would burst into tears, and the kids would suddenly become withdrawn and silent, making me feel like the heartless one. "Where would we go, Sarah?" Lisa would wail. "You want to throw your own family out onto the street? After all you promised our parents?" The subtle guilt trips evolved into outright demands. They stopped offering to contribute to bills. When I brought it up, Mark would sigh dramatically. "Sarah, you know we're struggling. Every penny counts. We'll pay you back when I get on my feet." The when never seemed to arrive. I was paying for everything. The surging utility bills, the increased grocery costs, the extra internet bandwidth they demanded for their endless streaming and gaming. My privacy vanished. My bedroom, once my sanctuary, became my only refuge. I would hear them talking about me, always in hushed tones, but loud enough for me to catch snippets. She's so uptight. Why does she care so much about a few dishes? It's her house, but we're family. She should be more understanding. It felt like they were talking about a difficult roommate, not the person who was keeping a roof over their heads. My possessions started to go missing. Small things at first. A charger, a book. Then larger items. A set of expensive kitchen knives I loved. My good headphones. When I asked about them, they'd shrug. Oh, maybe we borrowed it. We'll find it. They never did. It was a subtle form of theft, a slow draining of my personal. Jamie and Chloe, initially polite, grew increasingly entitled. Jamie would leave his clothes strewn across the living room, even after I'd asked him repeatedly to clean up. Chloe would use my expensive shampoo and makeup without asking, leaving the bottles nearly empty. Their friends were constantly over, loud and disrespectful, treating my house like a free-for-all-party zone. I'd come home from work to find strangers on my sofa, listening to loud music, leaving empty soda cans and pizza boxes everywhere. When I complained, Mark would just say, "They're just kids, Sarah. Let them have fun." My garden, once my pride and joy, was neglected. Tools went missing. Plants were trampled. Mac had promised to help maintain it, but he never lifted a finger. The beautiful rose bushes I had nurtured for years were dying from lack of water. The worst part was the emotional toll. I was constantly on edge. I dreaded coming home from work. My weekends, which used to be for relaxation and hobbies, became an exercise in avoidance and quiet despair. I spent more time outside the house, at friends' places, at coffee shops, anywhere to escape the suffocating atmosphere of my own home. I felt used, unappreciated, and increasingly resentful. But I kept telling myself, they're family. You have to help family. The Netflix password was just the latest and most blatant disrespect. It was a clear sign that they no longer saw me as the owner, the benefactor. They saw me as a resource, an ATM, a free hotel. And now they were even claiming my basic amenities as their own. It was a psychological shift, a complete inversion of the power dynamic. They felt they were doing me a favor by being here. My original fear of confrontation had kept me silent for too long. I had hoped they would simply get it, that their conscience would kick in, that they would realize the immense burden they were placing on me. But that was naive. They had no conscience about it. They were perfectly comfortable exploiting my good nature. They were thriving on my misery. The knot in my stomach tightened. I knew what I had to do. The kindness, the family ties, the promises to my parents, all of it had been used against me. They had broken those ties themselves through their act. It was time to stop being the nice sister and start being the homeowner, person whose life was being destroyed by their presence. This wasn't just about Netflix. It was about reclaiming my life, my peace, my home. And it was going to be the hardest thing I had ever done. The days following the Netflix discovery were a blur of suppressed fury and growing resolve. I needed to confront them, but I couldn't just blurt it out. I needed to be calm, logical, and firm. I needed to be everything they weren't. I tried to pick the right moment. But with Mark and Lisa, there never was a right moment. It was always too busy, or too late, or they were tired. One evening, Mark was sprawled on my sofa, watching a sports game on my television, volume blaring. Lisa was glued to her phone, probably online shopping again. Jamie was playing a loud video game in his room, and Chloe was FaceTiming loudly in the kitchen. The noise was deafening. Took a deep breath, walked into the living room, and stood in front of the television, blocking Mark's view. he grunted, annoyed. Sarah, move. The game's on. We need to talk, I said, my voice trying to be even. But a tremor ran through it. Mark sighed dramatically, leaning his head back. Can it wait? It's crunch time. No, it can't wait. It's important. I glanced at Lisa. She finally looked up from her phone, a flicker of irritation in her eyes. What is it, Sarah? She asked, her voice laced with impatience. It's about Netflix, I began. I decided to start with the most recent tangible offense. I tried to log in yesterday and the password was changed. I noticed it's now linked to your email, Mark. Mark's eyes narrowed. Lisa stiffened. A sudden silence descended, broken only by the distant shouts from Jamie's game. So, Mark said, his voice instantly defensive. We changed it. What's the big deal? It's just Netflix. It's my account, Mark. I pay for it. You can't just change the password without asking. My voice was rising, despite my efforts to stay calm. Oh, for crying out loud, Sarah, Lisa interjected, scoffing. It's literally a few dollars a month. We're living here using it. It just made sense to put it under our name so we could manage it. Manage it. I repeated, my voice now shaking with disbelief. You manage it. You don't pay for it. I pay for it. I pay for all the utilities. I pay for the internet. I pay for the groceries. I pay for everything in this house. You haven't contributed a single dollar in months. That's when Mark sat up, his face hardening. Don't you dare talk to Lisa like that. And don't you dare throw that in our faces. We're family. We're supposed to help each other. Are you really going to nickel and dime us when we're down on our luck? Down on your luck? I practically spat the words, all pretense of calm gone. You've been down on your luck for 2 years. 2 years, Mark. I took you in. I gave you a roof over your head. I fed your children. I gave you a place to live for free. And this is how you repay me. By disrespecting my property. By taking over my accounts. By treating me like a landlord you don't even have to pay. Lisa stood up, her hands on her hips, her face flushed with anger. How dare you? We help out. I do the dishes sometimes. Mark helps with the yard work sometimes. And we're saving you from being all alone in this huge house. Help out? You do the dishes sometimes? Mark never helps with the yard work, and I'd rather be alone than constantly feel like I am being used and taken advantage of. My voice was now a full-blown shout. The door to Jamie's room opened, and he peered out, eyes wide. Chloe came out of the kitchen, phone still in hand, looking startled. Mark pointed a finger at me. You are being hysterical, Sarah. We knew you'd be like this. Always so controlling, so obsessed with money. You've always been cold. No wonder you are still single, living alone in this big house, with no one but us to keep you company. That was a low blow. It always was, his go-to insult. He knew how sensitive I was about my personal life, my choices. It was designed to hurt, to invalidate my feelings, to shift the blame. Don't you dare bring that up, Mark, I screamed, tears stinging my eyes. The anger was overwhelming now, mixed with deep, aching pain. This is my house. My house. I pay for everything. You've destroyed my peace. You've taken advantage of my kindness, and you've shown absolutely no respect. This isn't just about Netflix, this is about everything. It's about you taking over my life. Lisa started crying loudly. Oh, listen to her. She wants to kick us out. She's always been jealous of us, of our family, of our happiness. Happiness? I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. You call this happiness? Living off someone else, never taking responsibility? That's not happiness, Lisa. That's parasitic. That's enough, Mark roared, standing up fully now, towering over me. His face was red, his fists clenched. He looked like the Mark of old, the one who used to bully me when we were kids, the one who always got his way through intimidation. If you don't like it, Sarah, maybe you should just leave. We'll manage fine without you. The words hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. Maybe you should just leave. In my own house. The audacity, the sheer nerve was breathtaking. My initial anger began to curdle into something colder, harder. This wasn't just a squabble, this was a war, and they had just declared. I stared at Mark, his defiant, angry face, then at Lisa, fake tears streaming down her cheeks, and at Jamie and Chloe, who were now looking at me with accusatory eyes. They had formed a united front, a wall of self-pity and entitlement. There was no reasoning with them. There was no appeal to their better nature, because there was no better nature left to appeal to. My generosity had not fostered gratitude. It had bred contempt. I didn't say another word. I turned, walked into my bedroom and slammed the door behind me. The noise of their raised voices, now arguing about me, filtered through the wood. I leaned against the door, trembling. This wasn't a conversation, it was an attempted coup. And they had made it abundantly clear. They weren't going anywhere unless I forced them. The heartbreak was immense, but so was the clarity. My family, or what was left of it, had abandoned me long ago. They had just finally made it explicit. My eyes fell on a framed photo on my nightstand. It was of my parents, Mark and me, years ago on a family vacation. We were all smiling, arm in arm. A ghost of a memory from a time when family felt like love and support, not a battleground. That family was gone. And I had to accept that. Confrontation, or rather, their aggressive dismissal of my concerns left me reeling. But amidst the pain, a cold clarity began to emerge. The Netflix password, the unpaid bills, the disrespect. It was all part of a larger pattern. They weren't just taking over my house, they were trying to take over my life. And I knew deep down that their "maybe you should just leave" comment wasn't just a throwaway insult. It was a projection of their own unspoken desire. They wanted me gone. They wanted the house. A few days later, I discovered something that confirmed my worst fears. Something that made the Netflix password seem utterly trivial. A childish prank compared to the true depth of their betrayal. I had been meaning to check my mailbox for a while. I usually got my mail electronically, but sometimes important documents still came in paper form. I walked down to the curb, opened the box, and found a stack of letters. Most were junk mail, but one envelope stood out. It was from the bank that held my mortgage, and it was addressed to occupant. My heart pounded. Why occupant? All my mail was addressed to me. I opened it quickly, my fingers fumbling. Inside was a notice about a missed mortgage payment. Missed mortgage payment? That was impossible. My mortgage was on autopay. Came directly from my savings account every month, on the 1st. I had never missed a payment in my life. This house was my financial anchor, my biggest asset, my most important responsibility. I scrolled through my banking app on my phone, my hands shaking. I checked the mortgage account, and there it was. Not just one missed payment, two months. And my savings account balance was drastically lower than it should have been. It looked like 2 mortgage payments had gone out, but they weren't my payments. Panic seized me. I called my bank immediately. After navigating several automated menus, I finally reached a representative. I explained the situation, my voice trembling. The representative was polite but unhelpful at first, explaining that the payment seemed to have been made, then reversed, due to insufficient funds in the linked account. What linked account? I asked, confused. My savings account always had sufficient funds. The account ending in XX, she said. It wasn't my account number. It was close to my brother Mark's old account number. One I vaguely remembered from years ago. This can't be right, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. My mortgage is paid from my savings account. Account yay. She put me on hold for a few minutes. When she came back, her voice was more serious. Ma'am, it appears there was a change request filed 2 months ago to alter the payment method for your mortgage. It was switched from account yay to account X. And then that account repeatedly had insufficient funds, leading to the missed payments and late fees. My breath hitched. A change request. Who filed it? The request was submitted online, with the correct login credentials for your mortgage account. It would have required knowledge of your password and security questions. My mind spun. My mortgage password. I kept it in a locked document on my computer. No one had access to my computer, except, of course, they had full access to my house. They were always looking over my shoulder. They saw me type things in. They had time alone in my home when I was at work. Mark was always curious, always snooping. He must have seen me type in my password or found it. And then he used it. He changed the payment method. Is there any way to see who logged in? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. We can trace the IP address, ma'am. We can also see the details of the account that was linked. It appears to be an account held by a Mr. Mark Johnson. Mark's full name. The blood drained from my face. This wasn't just a Netflix password. This was fraud. This was my brother, my own flesh and blood, deliberately trying to sabotage my finances, to make me miss mortgage payments, to put my house at risk. He wasn't just living here for free. He was actively trying to bankrupt me, to undermine my ownership. He was trying to get me to lose the house so he could swoop in and claim it, or perhaps force me to sell it so he could take a cut. The depth of the betrayal was staggering. It felt like a physical blow. My house, my sanctuary, was now a trap. The person I had welcomed, the person I had tried to save, was trying to steal it from me. He wanted to push me out, to take everything. The Netflix password was a childish tantrum. This was pure malice. I ended the call, my mind a whirlwind of disbelief, anger, and profound sadness. My brother would do this to me. He wasn't just irresponsible, he was malicious. He was a thief. He was trying to destroy my financial future, my home, my stability. I felt a wave of nausea. I looked around my living room, the sofa where Mark usually sat, the television he controlled, the messy coffee table where he left his empty snack wrapper. Every single thing in this house, every memory, every comfort, was now tainted by his presence, by his insidious plan. I remembered Lisa's words during our argument. She wants to kick us out. She's always been jealous of us, of our family, of our happiness. It was projection. They wanted me out. They were jealous. They were the ones without a moral compass. I walked numbly to my computer. I changed all my passwords, starting with the mortgage account, then my bank accounts, my investment accounts, everything. I felt violated, exposed. I had been so trusting, so foolish. Then a new thought, colder, sharper than anything before. If they had accessed my mortgage account, what else had they accessed? My mail, my important documents, my identity. The fear was crippling. I knew with absolute certainty what I had to do. This was beyond family squabbles. This was criminal. This was a direct threat to my existence. I couldn't just have an argument with them about this. I couldn't just ask them to leave. I needed legal help, I needed protection. The heartbreak was immense, a gaping wound in my chest. My brother, the person I had loved and protected my entire life, had become my enemy. He had tried to steal my home, the very foundation of my life. The generosity I had extended had been met not just with ingratitude but with active malevolence. The quiet, mild-mannered sister was gone. In her place, a fierce, protective instinct had ignited. I would fight for my home. I would fight for my peace. I would fight for myself. And I would make sure they paid for every single ounce of pain they had inflicted. The tears came then, hot and stinging, not just for the betrayal, but for the profound loss of the family I thought I had. That family was dead long before my parents had passed. The day after discovering Mark's attempt to sabotage my mortgage, I was a wreck. Sleep was impossible. My mind raced, replaying every interaction, every suspicious glance, every accidental disappearance of a document. I felt like I was living in a true crime podcast, and I was the unsuspecting victim. But I refused to be a victim. I spent the morning researching tenant rights, eviction process, family fraud, identity theft protection. The legal jargon was daunting, but the more I read, the more I understood the gravity of the situation and the steps I needed to take. My heart ached, but my resolve hardened with every legal article I consumed. This wasn't just emotional, it was legal, and I needed professional help. I called a lawyer. It felt surreal, calling a lawyer on my brother. The receptionist put me through to a paralegal, who scheduled a consultation for the next morning. I had to pay a fee just for the consultation, which stung, especially given my already strained finances. But I knew it was necessary. The next morning, I dressed carefully, trying to project an air of calm I didn't feel. I left the house before Mark and Lisa usually woke up, avoiding any awkward encounters. The lawyer's office was in a sleek, modern building downtown. My stomach was churning the entire drive. Mr. Peterson was a stern-looking man with kind eyes. He listened patiently as I recounted the entire story, starting from them moving in, the escalating disrespect, the unpaid bills, the stolen items, the Netflix password, and finally, the mortgage payment sabotage. I had brought printouts of my bank statements, the occupant letter, and my mortgage account history. When I finished, the silence in the room was heavy. Mr. Peterson leaned back in his chair, tapping a pen thoughtfully. "Miss Smith," he began, his voice calm and measured. "This is a very serious situation. What your brother has done, attempting to manipulate your mortgage, is outright fraud. It could even be considered attempted identity theft. This goes far beyond a simple landlord-tenant dispute." Relief washed over me, a strange mix of validation and dread. Perusing that I wasn't crazy, that this was indeed serious. Dread because it meant the road ahead would be incredibly difficult. "What are my options?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "First, we need to secure your financial accounts. You've already changed passwords, which is good. We should also put a fraud alert on your credit reports immediately, just in case they've tried to open new lines of credit in your name. We'll also send a formal cease and desist letter regarding any further attempts to access your accounts." I nodded, writing furiously in a small notebook I'd brought. "Second, regarding their presence in your home," Mr. Peterson continued, "since they've been living there for 2 years without a formal lease, and especially given the financial contributions you've made to their living expenses, they could argue they have certain tenant rights, even without paying rent. However, their actions, particularly the fraud, severely weaken any such claim. We can move to evict them." "Evict my brother?" The words felt foreign on my tongue. "Yes, Given the circumstances, I would recommend a for-cause eviction due to their unlawful activity and breach of any implied agreement. We'll start by serving them with a formal notice to quit. This legally informs them that their tenancy is terminated, and they must vacate the premises by a specific date. In your state, this typically gives them a period of 30 days. If they don't leave, we'll then have to file an unlawful detainer lawsuit in court to obtain a court order for their removal. I swallowed hard. And what if they don't leave after that? Then the sheriff's department will physically remove them. It's a long process, Miss Smith. It can take several weeks, sometimes months, depending on how they respond and if they try to delay the process. It will be emotionally taxing and likely expensive, but it is the legal path to regain control of your property. What about the fraud? I asked. Can I press charges? Mr. Peterson considered this. You could. We could file a police report. However, bringing criminal charges against a family member can be incredibly complex and often adds an extra layer of hostility to the eviction process. It also opens you up to intense scrutiny during any investigation. My recommendation initially would be to focus on getting them out of your home. Once they are gone and you are safe, we can then revisit the possibility of pursuing criminal action. Perhaps as leverage to recover any financial damages they've caused you, such as the late fees on your mortgage or the cost of the stolen items. So I have to live with them while this is all happening. The thought made my stomach clench. Unfortunately, yes. Unless you have somewhere else you can stay during this period. We'll send the notice immediately. They will know what's coming. Be prepared for a significant escalation in their behavior. They will likely be angry, manipulative, and may try to retaliate. You need to protect yourself, your peace of mind, and your property. He outlined steps for my safety: changing the locks as soon as they leave, installing security cameras, documenting everything, and avoiding confrontation outside of what was necessary. He also suggested changing my direct deposit for my paychecks to a new bank account, just to be safe. Leaving his office, I felt a heavy weight lift, replaced by a new, equally heavy weight of impending battle. It was going to be ugly. It was going to be painful. But for the first time in 2 years, I felt like I had a plan, a path forward. The family I had clung to, the image of my brother, had shattered. But I was finally ready to pick up the pieces of my own life, even if it meant doing it alone. The heartbreak was now laced with a steely determination. This was my home, and I was going to fight for it. The notice to quit arrived a few days later, delivered by a processor. I had made sure to be at work when it happened, wanting to avoid the initial explosion. But I couldn't avoid the fallout. My phone started ringing off the hook, a rapid-fire succession of calls from Mark, Lisa, and even my niece and nephew. I ignored them all. I wasn't ready to face their manufactured outrage. When I finally pulled into my driveway that evening, a sense of dread washed over me. The house lights were blazing, and I could hear raised voices even before I unlocked the front door. I took a deep breath, clutching my keys, and stepped inside. The living room was a scene of chaos. Mark was pacing furiously, red-faced, holding the official-looking document in his hand. Lisa was sobbing loudly on the sofa, clutching a crumpled tissue. Jamie and Chloe sat silently, staring at me with wide, accusatory eyes, like I had just committed a heinous crime. "How could you, Sarah?" Mark roared, his voice shaking with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "How could you do this to your own brother, to your own family? A goddamn eviction notice." "It's not an eviction notice yet, Mark," I said, my voice steady. trying to project calm despite the hammering of my heart. It's a notice to quit. It means you have 30 days to find somewhere else to live. Lisa wailed even louder. 30 days? Where are we supposed to go? You are throwing us out on the street. After all we've done for you. What have you done for me, Lisa? I asked, looking directly at her. Besides drain my bank account, disrespect my home, and try to steal my house from under me. Mark's pacing stopped abruptly. His eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? Don't play dumb, Mark, I said, stepping further into the room. I know about the mortgage payments. I know you changed the payment method, tried to make me default. I know you tried to defraud me. My lawyer knows too. His face went pale. Lisa stopped crying. The kids looked between us, confused. The atmosphere in the room shifted from outrage to a chilling silence. That's a lie, Mark stammered, but his voice lacked conviction. He averted his gaze. I didn't do anything like that. The bank has records, Mark. IP addresses, account numbers. It's all there. Don't deny it. This isn't just about disrespect anymore. This is criminal fraud, and my lawyer is prepared to pursue it if necessary. Lisa let out a choked gasp. Criminal? Mark, what did you do? Nothing, he yelled, rounding on her. She's making it up. She's always been jealous, trying to cause trouble. I am not making it up, Mark. And it's not jealousy. It's about you trying to steal my home. The home I worked for, the home I bought, the home I welcomed you into out of the kindness of my heart. A kindness you have absolutely abused. Jamie, my nephew, spoke up then, his voice small. Aunt Sarah, is this true? Are you really kicking us out? My heart ached for him, for Chloe. They were caught in the middle of their parents' deceit. But I couldn't let that sway me. Yes, Jamie. Your parents have made it impossible for us to live together here anymore. This is my home, and they have betrayed my trust in a way that I can't overlook. Lisa jumped up suddenly, fierce despite her earlier tears. That's what the notice to quit is for, Lisa. And if you don't leave, the court will make you, and then the sheriff will make you. I hope it doesn't come to that, for everyone's sake. Mick seemed to deflate a little, the bravado draining from him, replaced by a simmering resentment. You'll regret this, Sarah. You'll be all alone, and you'll have no one. I'd rather be alone and safe in my own home than constantly under threat from my own family, I countered, my voice firm. You have 30 days. Use them wisely. I suggest you start looking for a place to live. And if anything at all, goes missing or is damaged in this house, I will add it to the list of damages my lawyer will pursue. Consider this your final warning. I turned and walked to my bedroom, leaving them in the stunned silence. I locked the door behind me. My hands were shaking and tears streamed down my face. But they weren't tears of sadness this time. They were tears of exhaustion, of anger, of a profound, soul-deep weariness. But beneath it all, there was a faint flicker of hope. I had done it. I had faced them. I had started the process. The fight was far from over, but the first decisive step had been taken. The next 30 days were a living hell. The house, once a haven, became a war zone. The initial shock and attempts at negotiation from Mark and Lisa quickly morphed into a campaign of emotional torment. They didn't leave immediately, of course. They dug in their heels. The first strategy was the silent treatment. For days they barely spoke to me, communicating only in clipped, hostile tones if absolutely necessary. Kids followed suit, avoiding eye contact, retreating to their rooms. The air in the house was thick with resentment. I found myself walking on eggshells even more than before, dreading every encounter. Then came the passive-aggressive phase. My groceries started disappearing even faster. My mail would be opened and left haphazardly on the counter. My internet connection mysteriously slowed down. During their peak usage times, they would leave lights on all night, crank up the heating or air conditioning, and use every appliance possible, clearly trying to inflate my utility bills as a final act of spite. I found my favorite coffee mug shattered in the trash one morning, alongside a mocking note that read, "Oops." They started spreading rumors among our distant relatives, calling me heartless, greedy, a cruel sister who was throwing her family out onto the street. My aunt, my mother's sister, called me one afternoon, her voice filled with thinly veiled disapproval. "Sarah, I heard about Mark and Lisa. Is it true you are really evicting them? Your own brother? Your parents would be so disappointed." It was a sharp knife to the heart. "Aunt Helen," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "here is a lot you don't know. Mark tried to defraud me. He tried to make me lose my house. He changed the payment method on my mortgage without my knowledge. He tried to steal from me." "Oh, come now, dear," she said dismissively. "Mark can be a little irresponsible, but fraud. He's your brother. He would never. He probably just made a mistake. And even if he did, family forgives. You need to show compassion." I hung up the phone feeling utterly alone. They had successfully poisoned the well. No one would believe me over charming, victimized Mark. The isolation was profound. The children, Jamie and Chloe, were used as pawns in their parents' game. Lisa would make them sit on the porch looking sad when I came home, or encourage them to leave their dirty clothes and dishes everywhere, knowing it would annoy me. Jamie would blast his music even louder, and Chloe would invite friends over late at night, letting them make noise and leave a mess. It broke my heart to see them used this way, but I also saw the entitlement growing in their eyes, mirroring their parents. They were learning bad habits, learning to exploit kindness. I started spending as much time as possible outside the house. I stayed late at work, went to the gym, visited friends, even if I just sat in a coffee shop for hours. Anything to avoid the suffocating atmosphere of my own home. My bedroom became my fortress. I ate my meals in there, read in there, slept in there, only venturing out for necessities. I installed a small security camera pointed at my bedroom door, just for peace of mind. One evening I came home to find a new lock on the pantry door. My pantry, filled with my groceries. "What's this?" I asked, my voice tight. Mark sauntered into the kitchen, a smirk on his face. "Oh, that? We figured if you are going to treat us like strangers and evict us, we might as well secure our own food. We bought those groceries, you know." "No, you didn't, Mark," I said, a wave of weariness washing over me. "I bought them, and you locked me out of my own pantry, in my own house." "Well, you are the one who started it, Sarah," Lisa chimed in, suddenly appearing. "Being so unwelcoming, it's just a lock. You can afford more food, can't you?" The absurdity of it was almost comical. They were literally locking me out of my own food supply. It was a petty, childish act, but it symbolized everything. They were seizing control, one small act at a time, trying to exert their dominance until the very last minute. I didn't argue. I just stared at the lock, then at their defiant faces. My lawyer had told me to document everything, no matter how small. I took a photo of the lock with my phone. Then I went to my car, drove to the grocery store, and bought enough food to keep in my bedroom mini fridge for the next few weeks. Thought of eating alone in my bedroom like a refugee in my own home filled me with a deep, profound sadness. But it was better than fighting, better than engaging in their toxic game. As the 30-day deadline approached, their behavior became more erratic. There were desperate attempts at reconciliation, sudden bursts of feigned politeness, followed by explosive arguments and renewed hostility. They were trying every trick in the book: guilt, anger, manipulation, passive aggression. But I held firm. My resolve, forged in the fires of betrayal, would not break. The heartbreak was constant. A dull ache in my chest, but it was overshadowed by the fierce desire to reclaim my peace, my home, my life. I knew eviction day would be a terrible ordeal, but I also knew it was the only way out. This was a battle for my sanity, my financial future, my very identity, and I was going to win. The day came. Eviction day. I had notified the sheriff's office in advance, as per MY lawyer's advice. They had a specific window for these things, usually in the morning. I woke up before dawn, unable to sleep. My stomach churned with a mixture of fear and anticipation. This was it. The final, brutal confrontation. I made myself coffee, brewed in my small coffee maker in my bedroom, and sat by the window watching the sunrise. The house was quiet, for once, the calm before the storm. I heard Mark and Lisa stirring around 7 a.m. I heard whispers, then a few raised voices, then a frantic flurry of activity. They knew what was coming. Around 8:30 a.m. I heard the distinct sound of a vehicle pulling up outside. Not my familiar neighbors' cars. I peered through the blinds. It was a sheriff's patrol car. My heart hammered against my ribs. I walked out of my room, my legs feeling like lead. Mark and Lisa were standing in the living room, surrounded by suitcases and garbage bags filled with their belongings. They had packed, at least partially. Jamie and Chloe were already outside, sitting on the curb with backpacks, looking miserable. Mark's face was a mask of furious resentment. Lisa's eyes were red and swollen from crying. The doorbell rang. I opened it. 2 sheriff's deputies stood on my porch, looking solemn. Miss Smith, one of them, asked, a burly man with a kind but firm expression. "Yes, that's me," I replied, my voice shaky. "We're here to execute an unlawful detainer order for this property," he stated, holding up a document. "Are the tenants present?" "Yes, they are," I said, gesturing to Mark and Lisa. The deputy stepped inside, followed by his partner. "Mark and Lisa Johnson, you are hereby ordered to vacate these premises immediately. If you do not comply, you will be forcibly removed." Mark bristled. "This is ridiculous. She's my sister. She's throwing us out. She's a monster." The deputy's expression didn't change. "Sir, this is a legal court order. You've had notice. You need to gather your belongings and leave now." Lisa burst into fresh tears, loud and dramatic. "We have nowhere to go. She's making us homeless. Please, you can't do this." The second deputy, a younger woman, spoke up, her voice equally firm. "Ma'am, we understand this is difficult, but our job is to enforce the law. If you resist, you will be arrested." Mark hesitated, looking around the room, then at me. His eyes were filled with such hatred, such venom, that it chilled me to the bone. "You'll regret this, Sarah. You'll die alone in this house. This will be on your conscience forever." "My conscience is clear, Mark," I said, meeting his gaze, my voice steady despite my trembling hands. "I offered you help, and you tried to destroy me. This is your doing, not mine." Lisa suddenly lunged forward, pushing past the deputies. She grabbed a large ornate vase from my antique side table, a gift from my grandmother, and hurled it at the wall with a scream of pure rage. It shattered into 100 pieces. "No!" I cried out, my heart sinking. The deputies immediately grabbed Lisa, restraining her. "That's enough, ma'am. You are creating property damage. Do you want to be arrested?" Vark stared at the broken vase, then at Lisa, then at me. A flicker of something that looked like fear, or perhaps regret, in his eyes. He knew she had crossed a line, and he knew it was over. "Let's go, Lisa," he mumbled, pulling her away from the deputy's grasp. He started grabbing their bags, his movements jerky and angry. "Come on, we don't need this Harridan's house anyway." They stomped through the living room, grabbing their remaining bags. Mark paused at the front door, turning to face me one last time. "You've broken this family, Sarah," he snarled. "You've destroyed everything." "You destroyed it, Mark," I replied, my voice quiet but firm. "Not me. You did this to yourself." He scoffed, then turned and walked out, Lisa following him, still sniffling dramatically. The deputies followed them out to the curb, where Jamie and Chloe were already waiting. They exchanged a few quiet words, then watched as Mark and Lisa piled their bags into their old, battered car. Jamie and Chloe got into the back seat. Chloe looked back at the house, her eyes meeting mine. There was no anger, no accusation, just a flicker of sadness. I offered her a small, tight smile. She didn't return it. Car started, sputtered, and then pulled away, driving down my street, away from my house, away from my life. The deputies came back inside. "Are you all right, Miss Smith?" the male deputy asked. "Yes," I breathed, feeling utterly drained. Thank you so much," he nodded. "We recommend you change your locks immediately and consider installing a security system. We've seen this kind of resentment before, just to be safe." "I will, I promise." They offered their condolences for the broken vase and assured me I could press charges for the damage. Then they left, leaving me alone in the house. The silence was deafening. The house felt strangely empty, vast and quiet. Too quiet. I walked over to the shattered pieces of the vase, picking up a shard. My grandmother's vase. Broken. Just like my family. A profound weariness settled over me. The battle was won, but the cost was immeasurable. I had my house back, but I had lost my brother, my sister-in-law, my niece, my nephew. The family ties were irrevocably severed. The Netflix password, the initial spark, seemed like a forgotten, distant memory. It had led to this. To a broken vase, a fractured family, and a desolate victory. The silence was deafening, a vast, echoing emptiness that filled every corner of the house. They were gone. Car had driven away, carrying Mark, Lisa, Jamie, and Chloe out of my life, perhaps forever. The deputies had left, leaving me alone in the wreckage of what had once been my peaceful sanctuary. I stood in the living room, staring at the shattered pieces of my grandmother's vase on the floor. Each shard was a painful reminder of the final act of malice, a symbol of the utter destruction of my family. The anger was still there, simmering beneath the surface, but it was overshadowed by a crushing wave of grief. The victory felt hollow. I had won the battle for my home, but at what cost? The first few days were surreal. The silence was unnerving. I walked through the house, opening doors, peering into rooms that had once been filled with their noise, their clutter, their overwhelming presence. Jamie's makeshift bed on the living room sofa was gone. Chloe's guest room was stripped bare, except for a few forgotten hair ties and an empty soda can. Kitchen, usually a disaster zone, was now eerily clean, perhaps because they had taken most of their pots and pans with them. I spent hours cleaning, scrubbing away 2 years of accumulated dirt, grime, and emotional residue. I vacuumed up the last crumbs of their presence, wiped away the stickiness from the countertops, aired out the stale smell of their lives. It was physically exhausting but therapeutic. With every scrub, every wipe, I felt a tiny piece of my home and my soul returning to me. I repaired the broken sprinkler head in the garden, nurtured the dying rose bushes. I bought new groceries and restocked my pantry, leaving the new lock a grim reminder of their petty cruelty. I changed all the locks on the doors, the very same day they left. I installed a comprehensive security camera system, covering every entrance and key areas inside. The house felt safer, more secure, but also incredibly lonely. My friends were supportive. They listened, they brought over meals, they offered comfort. Even their kindness couldn't fill the void left by the complete and utter severance of my family ties. I had always been close to Mark despite his flaws. The idea of him being completely out of my life with such a bitter ending was hard to accept. I thought about Jamie and Chloe. What would happen to them? Would they ever forgive me for evicting them? Would they ever understand? One evening, I found myself sitting on my sofa, the remote in my hand. I navigated to the Netflix app. I had forgotten about it in the grand scheme of things. It was still logged out. I typed in my original password. It worked. The screen lit up with my profile, my account, my choices. The small victory felt insignificant now, almost pathetic, compared to everything else. The Netflix password was merely a symptom, not the disease. The disease was the insidious rot of entitlement, the parasitic nature of unearned dependency, the complete absence of gratitude, and it had infected my family to the point of no return. Weeks turned into months. Quiet of the house became less oppressive, more comforting. I started to rediscover my old routines, my hobbies. I gardened again, read books late into the night, cooked elaborate meals for myself just because I could. I reclaimed my peace, my space, my life. But the scars remained. The trust I had once so freely given was shattered. Every interaction with anyone, even friends, was now viewed through a lens of cautious scrutiny. I found myself guarded, wary, always half expecting betrayal. The innocence I once possessed, the belief in the inherent good of family, was gone. Sometimes late at night, I would look at the empty chairs at my dining table, the quiet living room, and a wave of profound sadness would wash over me. I had envisioned holidays, family gatherings, children's laughter filling these rooms. Now it was just me. Alone. Mark never called, Lisa never called. No one from that side of the family reached out, except for an occasional judgmental email from Aunt Helen, which I promptly deleted. I sometimes saw social media posts from distant cousins about Mark's new struggles and how selfish I was. I blocked them all. My small family was now just me. I learned to live with the loneliness, to find solace in solitude. I invested in myself, in my well-being. I joined a book club, took up painting, volunteered at an animal shelter. I built a new life, a life free from the constant burden and anxiety of their presence. It was a life I had fought for, a life I deserved. The memory of the betrayal lingered, a phantom limb that still ached. The heartbreaking truth was that the people I loved, the people I had tried to save, had actively tried to destroy me. They had taken my kindness, twisted it into a weapon, and aimed it straight at my heart, at my home. The Netflix password. It was such a small thing, that little pop-up message, but it had opened my eyes to a much larger, much more devastating truth. And while I had my peace back, while my home was finally mine again, the cost had been the complete and utter loss of my family. It was a victory, yes, but it was the most heartbreaking victory of my life. I was free, but I was also irrevocably alone. And that was a reality I would carry with me, always.